Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be taking a look at the classic Call of Cthulhu scenario, Rigid Air. Written by Marion and Phil Anderson, the scenario was published in 1992's Fearful Passages. For those not familiar with that collection, Fearful Passages offers scenarios each focused on a different means of transportation, such as trains, planes, and automobiles, armored cars, diving suits. Rigid Air is an adventure about airships. Coming in at just 12 pages, and the first full page is really just the history and details about airships themselves, the scenario is playable in a single session. It gives us travel, investigation, a good potential for combat, and one of the coolest and most gruesome monsters ever. So what I'm going to do is offer my tips and my criticisms as a game master who has successfully run this adventure. And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to be giving this one to you from a player's side of things as we explore the adventure where we came a hair's breadth from being in a total party wipe. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, if you ever want to experience this adventure, please stop here. But send your Game Master this way to see about running this adventure for you. Okay, Keepers, let's get this puppy started. As I explained, Rigid Air is about airships, specifically the airship Terra Nova. The background of the adventure is that several years before, the airship Terra Nova, when it was operating under a previous name, went on a polar expedition looking for the magnetic North Pole. Now, unknown to the crew was that the expedition was organized by an evil cult who were attempting to summon some sort of creature into this world. However, instead of it being a horrible monster, the cultist ended up summoning an egg. Okay, it didn't actually look like this sort of egg. It was an evil egg, which didn't really look like this either, but yeah, you get the idea. The expedition crew was paid off very handsomely after their return, and they were sworn to secrecy. And the airship returned to civilization, having told the world that their mission to the magnetic North Pole was a complete bust. Life went on, and most people forgot about the expedition really taking place. And all this while, though, that little egg had hatched, and it started growing into a creature of nightmare. My only problem with this whole opening story that it gives us is that it spent a lot of time discussing the financier behind the whole expedition, who is millionaire philanthropist Edward Chandler. And the module made it sound like I as a keeper should already know who that was, and that's because Edward Chandler is evidently the villain or one of the villains in the Fungi from Yugoth campaign. So now that I know that mention was just an Easter egg, then cool. But it sounded really important when I was reading it the first time that I should know who Edward Chandler was, but you can completely cut that part out if you like. It's not necessary. It's just kind of a thing they threw in as a little bit of flavoring for those who were aware of who Edward Chandler was. So in case you read this and you're wondering who the hell is that guy, that's who he is. The investigators are brought into this scenario several years later when one of them receives word that an old friend has passed away, and he's named the investigator the executor of their estate. Aw, damn! My old friend, Robert Douglas, seems to have passed away. Man, we used to be such good friends back in college. Me and Robert Douglas were getting all sorts of little hijinks like that. I hadn't talked to him since he got back from that failed polar expedition back in 21, but looks like I gotta go up to Canada to help settle his affairs. But in the meantime, this is for my old friend, Robert Douglas. The reading of the will is to take place in Nelson, British Columbia, and the module doesn't really give a time frame of when this reading of the will is going to be, so I suggest the Keepers give some sort of time frame to it, whether it be 10 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but some sort of deadline of when they need to be there by. The closest city to Nelson is Vancouver, and it's not exactly that close, but any trains or planes or even major roads that they're using to get to Nelson are going to be going through Vancouver most likely. Now, whatever means that the investigators use to get to Canada or through Vancouver and eventually to Nelson, whichever one they do is perfectly fine, but I suggest that you have it be that once they arrive in Vancouver, they only have about 2 days left to make it the rest of the way to Nelson. So while an airplane from Arkham or wherever might just take 3 days to get to Vancouver, or a train may take 5 or 6 days or car take 10. If the investigators are set to get there early and they want to get to Vancouver with more than 2 days left to spare, you can set it up where they might have, bad weather or engine troubles or something else that delays the journey. That way, once they get to Vancouver, they've got no more than 10 days left to make it the rest of the way to Nelson. Crossing the border into Canada means that they have to go through customs, and any non-hunting firearms are expressly forbidden.
Wait, you want to take my pistol away from me? Yeah, I knew it, guys. This is all an elaborate plot by the Keeper in order to get us unarmed. And then once we get up in Canada, he's going to throw some sort of unspeakable horror at us. You ask me, it's probably going to be a Bigfoot, or maybe even a moose monster.
Now, nothing's going to happen to them while they're in Canada, but it does act as a good step to get your players a bit paranoid. A little paranoia is pretty healthy for players to have. Now, once they do arrive in Vancouver, they've got a few options about how they're going to get the rest of the way to Nelson. Driving through those mountain roads, which are all windy and completely out of the way, that's going to take them about a week to complete that journey. But there's also 2 different trains that could take them there. One of them takes 14 hours, while the other one takes 24 hours.
Okay, guys, we're going to be cutting this one pretty close, so we're probably going to have to use the train to get the rest of the way there in time.
But then the ticket guy tells them that there's recently been an airship called the Terra Nova that's doing some sort of trial service about carrying passengers or any freight back and forth between Nelson and Vancouver. So for about the same price as just them getting a train ticket, they could fly there in just 4 to 6 hours.
Hold off on buying those train tickets, fellas. Why, yes, sir. I would like to know more information about this airship service that's flying to Nelson. Getting to fly above the mountains in an age when most people only ever dreamed of flight, that does interest me. And I would like to subscribe to your newsletter. Holy crap, guys! We are going to be flying in style, like kings of the air.
Now, they don't actually have to take the airship. They can go to Nelson by any means that they want. And along the way, they'll still meet and hopefully befriend the astronomer along the way. But for the price and the speed and just the sheer novelty of doing it, they'll probably be taking the airship. We get a deck plan of the Terra Nova, and from the observer windows, they get to marvel at all the views outside.
And since there's no prohibition in Canada, we get to visit the bar aboard this thing. Man, I am traveling by airship everywhere I go from now on.
Now, the investigators might notice a few things about the ship while they're on it, namely that the number of crewmen seems a little bit small for a ship of that size, and also all the crew seem a little bit distant or distracted. Now, keepers, I suggest that you give the Terra Nova some sort of distinct physical feature, something notable about it. Maybe it has 6 or 8 fin stabilizers instead of the standard 4. Maybe it's got 2 extra fins, but they're up at the nose instead of just all at the back, or maybe the shape of the ship is longer or fatter or different than normal, something that would allow them to identify this ship easily if you were to have taken the name off of it, be able to identify it in a lineup. And if they don't take the airship to Nelson, that's perfectly fine. Just have it that once they arrive in Nelson, have them see the Terra Nova airship, maybe circling above if it's doing, a takeoff or a landing or something like that. And when they see the airship, go ahead and note to them whatever the memorable feature about it is. Have them notice that, because that's going to be important later on. Once they arrive in Nelson and they get to the reading of the will, the investigator is given a package and letter from their deceased friend. This was given to him by his lawyer just days before his friend died. Inside are several handouts, a list of names and locations, a letter from someone named Chester, and a book of some sonnets with several passages marked. Now, one thing with this letter is that the keeper is supposed to mention to the investigators that it is postmarked from Seattle, which is a huge hint. This is a linchpin clue right here. However, if the keeper either forgets to mention that little point, or if they mention it but the players don't hear it or they forget about it, that can completely stall out your game. So I suggest that instead of just kind of casually mentioning that this letter came from Seattle, either make an envelope for the handout. You actually put the letter inside the envelope and you have the envelope clearly marked that it was postmarked in Seattle, or just change the text of the letter to state that the person that sent it is in Seattle at the time that they sent it, and make that be part of the handout. That way the investigators, as they're playing the game, they're going through it, they can always see that little clue clearly written on the handouts that you've given them, rather than just having to remember some kind of thing that you kind of casually mentioned at the same time you gave them 2 or 3 or 4 handouts. Now, one other thing that's in this box is a photograph from the failed polar expedition that their friend had been on. one. And all of the crewmen's faces have been X'd out, except for two of them. One of those faces belongs to their friend who's now deceased, but the investigators don't know who the other crewman is that doesn't have their face marked out. Robert Douglas's widow, who's been separated from her husband for the past few years, she doesn't believe that Robert would have died climbing a tree as the coroner's report says he did. So she thinks that something is fishy is going on, and she asks the investigators to look into it. Other than some conversation with a local astronomer that the investigators, met and hopefully befriended on their journey to get to Nelson, as well as a nosy neighbor that's outside of Robert's home, there really isn't much else that the investigators can do in Nelson. When the investigators are ready to leave, they're going to learn that the Terra Nova airship has abruptly ceased its test flights going to town and is now headed to Seattle to be its new base of operations. So now, in order for the investigators to get back to Vancouver, they're going to have to take the train or drive. Now, this is going to be something they miss if the investigators took the train to get to town or if they drove to town. So they're not going to really catch that hint that the Terra Nova just abruptly ceased and is now going to be stationing itself out of Seattle. Also, once the investigators arrive in Vancouver, or if they eventually arrive in Seattle, they might begin researching this failed polar expedition that their friend had taken. Now, when they do, they should see some different photographs from the expedition, including a photograph of their airship, which is the Bellinghausen. And the reason that I suggested that you give the Terra Nova some distinct physical feature about it is that the Bellinghausen should look absolutely identical.
Hey guys, you notice these two airships look the exact same? I mean, I've never even seen that design of airship before, and now we got two of them in the same week? Yeah, it seems a little strange to me.
Now this should hopefully get them to start researching the Terra Nova itself, and that's when they're going to discover that yes, it most likely is the same airship but simply renamed. Also, the list of the different trial flights that it's been doing all over North and South America eerily lines up with all the dates of the people who died that are on that list that they found in the handout. With the people on the handout, all of those people who died were discovered headless, so that's also an interesting thing they should know. The list of all the crewmen who were on the original expedition ends up being the same list of the people that's on the list of people who have died. And the mysterious Chester that sent the letter is most likely going to be Chester Whittle as one of the people that was on that expedition. So with no other real leads other than the fact that Chester Whittle sent a letter and that letter came from Seattle, the investigators are most likely going to be heading there next. So once again, make it very, very clear that Chester's letter came from Seattle. Otherwise, they're not going to know where to go. Now, if the investigators never looked up the Terra Nova and found out what was going on with it because, they just didn't think about it, have it be that once they arrive at Seattle, they pretty quickly see a newspaper that's got a front page article about how the Terra Nova airship is now going to be doing trial flights out of Seattle, because that's something that would be worthy of being front page news, but is also a good way to tell them that this airship that they discovered up in Canada is now operating out of the same town that they just arrived in. If the investigators call Chester Whittle, I suggest either have his phone line be disconnected or have nobody answer the phone, and that way the only way they get to talk to him is by physically visiting him in his house. Now when they arrive, they're going to meet a paranoid shut-in who's wearing some weird aviation goggles. And it's going to take some good rolls and role playing in order to have him allow them into his house, and he should be, chain smoking and pacing around and overall pretty manic. Chester's going to tell them a story, and it's such a long story that the module gives it to you in handout form. He is convinced that the expedition leader, Captain Moore, is hunting down and killing the crewmen from the failed expedition. Now, if the investigators have figured out by now that the Bellinghausen and the Terra Nova are the exact same ship, and now that ship has come to Seattle, Chester is going to beg the investigators to help save him from Captain Moore and whatever it is that Captain Moore plans to do to him, and he's terrified and will refuse to leave his house. Also, if the investigators haven't pieced together yet that the Bellinghausen and the Terra Nova were the exact same airship, maybe add a photograph into Whittle's home, some picture on the wall, and that shows the whole crew standing in front of the Bellinghausen, which just happens to look exactly like this Terra Nova airship that they saw before. And that can give them that hint, and maybe it's something that they should research a little further. Chester's also going to give one of the player characters the weird goggles that he's wearing, and he says that they came in the mail from one of the former officers that was aboard the expedition, as well as came with that book of sonnets that the player characters got as a handout earlier. And these goggles were worn originally by the expedition leader, and all he knows about him them is that Captain Moore said that they make the obscure more apparent. Okay, so what's going on here is that egg that the expedition summoned has hatched, and it's grown into this huge creature that's called a dough spawn, which now lives in one of the airship's gas bags. The creature is incorporeal, so it extends throughout and around the ship, and what it's doing is that it has enslaved all the officers from the polar expedition, who are now the crew for the Terra Nova, and all of them except for Captain Moore, who's just kind of your run-of-the-mill insane cultist. The creature is hunting for the original crew, and it's mind-controlling them to get out of their house, get outside, and get somewhere high up, where the airship will then kind of swoop down and grab them and rip their head off. And then the dough spawn kind of takes their severed head and it plants them on the end of its little noodly appendages, and that way it kind of they become one with it, and it absorbs their minds and all this, which is just beautifully creepy. If the PCs go to the airfield, they're going to see the Terra Nova there, and the crew that's working on her, none of them are talking, none of them are joking, and none of them are going to be leaving the direct vicinity around the airship, any of them except for Captain Moore, who's the only one that doesn't seem to be sticking within 250 yards of the airship.
Huh, that is kind of weird, don't you think? I wonder what happens if I look at this whole thing through those goggles that Chester gave me, and holy crap! What the hell is that?
So through these goggles, the investigator sees all these tentacles that are extending around the ship, and each of the crewmen has one of these tentacles that's embedded in the back of their skull, all of them except for the captain, who seems to be the only one that's not tethered directly to the Terra Nova. If the investigators fail to act, then the monster is eventually going to summon Chester Whittle to go outside and get somewhere up high, and then the dough spawn is going to come in and take his head. And once it's got his head and it's got all the people that were on the original crew, it's going to take the Terra Nova, back up to the magnetic North Pole, where it's going to flee this world and begin the next stage of its life cycle. Now, if the investigators didn't get access to Chester Whittle, or they decided not to talk to him, but they're doing some sort of stakeout outside where they're watching this place, they're going to see it the night when Chester Whittle, just steps out of his house, and either climbs up on top of his roof, or maybe gets in his car and drives to one of the mountains that's around Seattle, and he gets up high, and then they're going to see it, when the dough spawn kind of grabs him with his invisible tentacle and kind of yanks him up into the sky and then rips his head off. And maybe when they see him leave, they can stop him, maybe wrestle him to the ground and restrain him until the dough spawn's spell wears off. And then if they do manage to stop Chester Whittle from giving himself up to the dough spawn because of the spell, then the airship is going to try again and again every single night until either it succeeds or the investigators succeed in stopping it.
That one was particularly fun for us because we were staying at Chester Whittle's house when it happened. So there he was. He was up all night, pacing around, chain smoking, and kind of peeking out the gaps in the windows, completely terrified and manic. And all of a sudden, he just goes dead calm, walks up to the back door, unlocks it, and starts trying to go outside. So there we are, we're wrestling him on the kitchen floor, trying to pin him down because he's trying to walk outside and get up on top of the roof of the house. Finally, we get him calmed down, and it's at that time we hear the distant sounds of engines circling up above, and we look out and we see the vague form of an airship through the cloud cover as it's making its way back to the airfield for the night.
If the investigators try to break into the Terra Nova, there's a few ways that they could get inside. The main door, but there's also access doors along the sides to get to the 4 engines. The module doesn't mention this one, but there's also a ladder that leads up to the observer's cupola at the top, so that is another potential entrance, but good luck getting to that one from the outside. Of course, they can always just, break a window or cut their way in through the airship's skin and just kind of crawl into all the metal work that's inside there and make their way down to any of the decks. Now, because the main part of this dough spawn is all hidden away inside one of the airship's gas bags, and the investigators are never going to see this thing unless they actually cut their way inside one of the gas bags or stick their head inside. It's full of helium. It's not like they're going to be able to live that long if they try to crawling in there with it. But since it's invisible and they can't see it until they actually look at it, and it's inside a gas bag, so they can't see it because the gas bag's in the way, my suggestion is that when they put those goggles on, it actually penetrates a little bit. It doesn't just see what's in front of them, it can see through a little bit of cloth. So that way, they can see the creature that's inside the gas bag and all of its terrible glory. But maybe it's not strong enough that they can't see the full creature when they're outside the airship. The outer skin of the airship, and then all of the metal bodywork and everything, and then the gas bag, that's too much for it to see through. But once they get inside of the Terra Nova and they look at the gas bag, and maybe they can see the gas bag moving, like there's something inside of it. But if they put the goggles on at that point, they could then see the full awesome terror of the creature inside of it. Now, every member of this crew, except for the captain, has been enslaved to it, and except for one is kind of partially enslaved. Donald Branberry has been able to fight this creature's influence, and he has a little bit of self-control, and he's the one that sent the goggles and the book of sonnets off to Chester Whittle, trying to warn him off. If the investigators start trying to break into the Terra Nova, or if they're snooping around a little bit much, he's going to reach out to them, and he's going to offer to help them, because he wants to be free of what's going on. And his different help can come in different forms, but ultimately when the rest of the crew comes for them, because the dose spawn's going to figure out what's going on, because it's got a direct connection into this guy's brain, so it's going to eventually figure out that somebody's trying to betray it, he's going to deliver this rousing speech to the rest of the crew, telling them that, they must be men and have the willpower and fight this thing. And the dose spawn's going to be all like, oh, no more of that now. And it's going to yank that tentacle that's in the back of his head, and it's going to rip his skull and his spine directly out of his body. And this just beautiful, gory display of awesome. Now, fighting the ship's crewmen is pretty easy. They're not really that strong. They really don't have too much in the way of weapons, except for just kind of some rudimentary clubs and tools. But once an investigator has either killed them or knocked them out, the dose spawn is then going to, reanimate their bodies as kind of these weird, deathless marionette puppets that it's got at the end of its tentacles, which is awesome and terrifying. Now, one thing I did add to this adventure is that I added a journal or a diary that's inside the captain's cabin, and it's a diary that explains everything that's going on and kind of logs the growth and the maturity of the dose spawn that the captain's been raising. Now, the investigators might not ever find this journal. They might be busy doing other stuff to plunder the captain's cabin looking for books, but I always like to drop in some sort of potential way that the investigators as well as the players can find out really what's going on and what the full story is. Once the investigators begin either attacking the monster or attacking the airship, the Terra Nova is just going to take off, and it can do this on its own. The creature's got tentacles that go everywhere, and it's going to begin fleeing this world and headed directly for the magnetic North Pole, where it can then, gate away and kind of live out its existence for all eternity somewhere else. That might be a problem if this airship takes off and there's some investigators on it at the time, because now they got to get off this airship that's in the air. So in our game, we did have one of the investigators jump free while the airship was beginning its takeoff, so it wasn't that high up, and she only broke her leg. But then another investigator died while trying to jump from it, because at the time it was, several hundred feet up in the air and on fire and crashing.
Yeah, that really was a beautiful death for that character. So there he was. He was horribly injured in all the fighting. So he climbs up that ladder through the airship and comes out that little hatch in the top. And now he's staggering along the spine of the airship, blood dribbling down between his feet as the flames are beginning to lick higher and higher up the sides. The stars are shining beautiful above, and we kind of imagine that the distant sound of Ave Maria was playing as he made his way to the tail of the airship, and he looked out as the airship began its slow descending crash. And he just leaped out into the darkness, hoping to catch himself on a tree as some other way to prevent a fiery death. He didn't survive that fall, and he died instantly, but man, that was a beautiful end for that character.
Overall, I really dig this adventure. It begins as kind of a slow burn build-up, but then morphs into, full-on terror as the investigators, have this encounter with this huge and alien monster. And I really love the little meat puppet zombie crewman that it's got. I didn't even go into the fact that all the severed heads that are on the end of its tentacles are all moaning. While the module never addresses this, I say that the goggles, which the investigators are most likely going to keep these goggles once the adventure is over, they just work exactly like a Dust of Benghazi, allowing them to see invisible creatures, which works as a really cool item for them to have, or maybe some sort of, weird science device that they can use in further adventures. The big thing that I suggest for running this adventure yourself is to give the Terra Nova a distinct feature. That way the players can piece together that it and the Bellinghouse are into the exact same airship. The module suggests using an idea roll if they don't make this logic leap themselves, but I'd prefer that you change it that way the players can figure this out on their own and not have to rely on needing a dice roll to do it for them. Next, make sure that Chester Whittle's letter and package somewhere on it state that they're from Seattle. The current clue relies just on a keeper kind of casually mentioning this once, and it's a really tiny detail that while you're handing all the players their handouts, if you kind of casually mention Seattle, they might not hear it or they might forget it because they got all this other stuff they're doing, and now this really pivotal clue has been completely lost. And finally, add some sort of diary or journal or captain's log that kind of states what's going on and allows the investigators to kind of discover the secret of everything that's been going on this whole time. Even if they don't have the opportunity, the characters don't have the chance to read it till after the adventure is over, it still gives them that chance to figure out what's going on. Now, of course, they might lose some sanity and maybe gain a little bit of mythos in the act of reading it, but I always like to put something into a mystery game that allows the player characters to discover kind of the background or the larger part of the story, and that kind of puts them more in a situation where they're kind of learning about their enemies rather than just always reacting to them. All these suggestions are pretty easy fixes, and if you employ them as a keeper, what you're going to be left with is a very solid Call of Cthulhu adventure.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews and how-tos, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, gamers, you have a great day. You know, earlier when I said that I only wanted to travel by dirigible from now on, yeah, I think I've reconsidered that idea.